Good evening, everyone. Welcome to this very important town hall being hosted by the Alberta Teachers Association. Thank you for taking the time tonight to participate. Your teacher colleagues from across the province are now being entered into the call, and we will be getting underway shortly once the audience is assembled. My name is Bill Mortogana, and I'm the Executive Director of Public Interest Alberta, and I'll be your host and moderator for this evening. We are also joined by Carol Henderson, President of the Alberta Teachers Association, and representatives of Alberta's 5 main political parties. Now let's take a second to get to know the voices of the people representing the political parties. Please let us know your name, your party, and role within the party, as well as the constituency you are running in. Let's start, if we could, with the Minister of Education, Thomas Lukaszuk.
Well, good afternoon all. My name is Thomas Lukaszuk. I am the MLA for Edmonton Castle Downs and currently sitting as the Minister of Education for Alberta. Thank you for your participation.
Thank you for joining us, Minister Lukaszuk. Mr. Vitor Marciano from the Wild Rose Alliance Party.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Vitor Marciano. I am one of Wild Rose as a Senate candidate, and I guess that makes my entire constituency the province of Alberta. I've been involved with Wild Rose for a few years now and part of their policy process and part of their internal party structure, and I've been asked to participate on this forum tonight, and I'm looking forward to some very good discussions with you all. Thank you.
Welcome, Mr. Marciano. Mr. Marciano's on bus up in White Court, so we're pleased you're able to join us tonight. Dr. Raj Sherman, leader of the Alberta Liberal Party.
Good evening. My name is Raj Sherman, and it's an honor for me to be a part of this process. Public education is one of the best things that we have to give to our children and to our society. Thank you for inviting me to this important chat today.
Great. Thank you, Raj. Mr. Glenn Taylor, the leader of the Alberta Party.
Well, thank you, Bill. I'm also participating by phone this evening. I'm up here watching a beautiful sunset on the eastern slopes of the Northern Rockies. I am the leader of the Alberta Party. I'm contesting the West Yellowhead constituency, and I believe that Albertans can be the best educated people in the world.
Great. Thank you, Glenn. And we're joined tonight as well by Mr. Darren Billis. He's a candidate. I'll let you introduce yourself, Darren.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Darren Billis. I am your New Democrat candidate in Edmonton, Beverly, Clairview, and proud and honored to be a part of this call. Thank you very much.
Great. So for those of you who are just joining us, tonight's town hall, we're currently phoning all close to 40,000 teachers across the province. Some of you will just be dialing in, and we've introduced the 5 candidates tonight. We're very pleased to be joined tonight as well by the President of the Alberta Teachers Association, who will be saying a few words shortly. We will also be going to you to ask questions of each of the candidates a little later on as we move forward here. So if at any time you have a question that you want to pose, the process is you will press 9 and you will be connected to one of the operators who will be standing by and to talk to you about the question that you might be proposing. We also are taking questions via email. If any of you are able to send question via email, the email address is townhall@ata.ab.ca. That's townhall@ata.ab.ca. So I think we're ready to get started with tonight's forum, and to do that, I'd like to welcome the President of the Alberta Teachers Association, Carol Henderson, to say a few words. Carol, are you with us? We heard. Carol, we heard you before. Are you there? Okay. Well, we'll just connect.
Now, can you hear me now? Can you hear me now?
There we go.
Okay,
yes, thanks,
good.
Carol. Yeah, we can hear you fine.
All right. Good evening, colleagues. And on behalf of Provincial Executive Council, I would like to start by thanking you for taking the time tonight to participate in this activity. The ATA is committed to promoting public education in Alberta and to advocating on behalf of our teachers. The association has a clear and consistent stance on nonpartisanship, and so instead of endorsing or promoting any party or candidates, we take it upon ourselves to ensure that our members are provided every opportunity to be made aware of the positions of candidates for public office as they relate to education and the teaching profession. Tonight you will hear from each of the parties, and you will have the opportunity to gather the information required so that you may make an informed choice on April 23rd. But colleagues, I have to ask you to consider carefully taking the next step in engaging your citizenship. Very few elections previously in Alberta's history have made dramatic changes to the political landscape in this province. This election has the potential to be one of the most historic elections in our province's time. The voice of teachers and the interests of public education must be heard. I encourage you to find time over the next 3 weeks to talk to your friends and neighbors about the issues that matter and encourage them to vote. And I'm asking you to consider volunteering some time or donating some money to help elect candidates that share your values and your passion for public education. And of course, in Alberta, when we say public education, we are referring to our public, separate, and francophone school boards. Once again, thank you for your time tonight and for your hard work and dedication to Alberta's students.
Thank you so much, Carol. We're really thrilled that the Alberta Teachers Association is hosting this event. It's a wonderful opportunity, and we have a representative from each of the 5 parties here. And we're still dialing people in, so if you're just joining us, welcome to this important telephone town hall. It's a great opportunity to use this new technology to hear from each of the political parties and talk about the important role of education in our province. So we're still dialing folks in, but we hope you can share your views shortly and ask questions very quickly with each of the candidates. So we have the representatives of the main political parties here to talk to the teachers. And what I think we should do is start by hearing from each of them. We've asked them to prepare 90-minute opening, 90 seconds. Yeah. You don't want to let politicians talk for too long, so we've asked them to speak for 90 seconds. And we're going to be changing the order up every time. And then later on, again, if you want to ask a question, do press 9 and you'll be connected to one of our excellent people receiving your call. So, Mr. Taylor, we're going to start with you. If you can keep your comments to 90 seconds, I'm going to keep track of the time here. And we'll turn it over to you, Mr. Taylor, from the Alberta Party.
Thank you, Bill. Welcome, everyone. I'd like to thank the Alberta Teachers Association and President Carol Henderson for the invitation to speak to you here this evening. I'm proud that the Alberta Party focuses first and foremost on listening and service to the community. We're committed to our ambitious and authentic program of citizen engagement as a way to transform how politics is done in this province. For example, 1,500 Albertans contributed to the development of our education policy. And to be clear, this listening process never stops. We're committed to continuous ongoing engagement and listening, and we want more feedback from the ATA members. For those of you that don't know us very well, the Alberta Party is a moderate, pragmatic, and inclusive party. We look for the best solutions no matter where they come from, because we believe that there's wisdom in all Albertans and across all political lines. Albertans have told us that they live in a beautiful province, and we have a proud history. But they've also told us that Alberta has not lived up to its potential. As you know, Alberta has among the highest high school dropout rates in the country. United Way estimates that Alberta's 9,000 annual high school dropouts cost society $142 million a year, and of course, the human cost of lost potential is immeasurable, and this situation is intolerable. So to help counter this trend, the Alberta Party would increase adult learning opportunities and remove the age limit for funding high school completion. We've developed education policy with 4 cornerstones, one being community-centered schools, the other being inclusivity and support for all learners, the third, assessment and accountability, and the fourth, meaningful and relevant learning programs. Throughout the program tonight, I intend to delve deeper into each of these 4 key areas of the Alberta Party policy for education. But I will say this. We want Alberta classrooms to be innovative, engaging, and focused on developing the skills that students will need to be successful in the world. And an Alberta Party government will establish strong programming opportunities for second language learning, arts and culture, and entrepreneurship. We will expand the use of online program delivery and other technologies such as what we're using tonight to make learning more accessible, flexible, and to support a diversity of learning styles and readiness. I look forward to our continued conversation this evening.
Great. Thank you so much. Now we're going to move to opening statements from Mr. Vitor Marciano. He's representing the Wild Rose Alliance Party. Mr. Marciano?
First, let me start off by thanking everybody participating out there over the phone. This technology is a wonderful way to engage voters and to engage general citizens in our discussion about how to make Alberta a better place. And in many ways, Wild Rose is committed to making Alberta a better place and to improving education in Alberta. Ensuring that Alberta's children have access to a world-class education is one of the most important roles the provincial government can play in building our province. And we think that it's one of the most important challenges facing our future. As we face a growing province, Wild Rose is committed to ensuring that Alberta's children are ready to be leaders in a changing global economy. About a month ago, we put forward our commitment to parents and educators about how a Wild Rose government would treat education. And I'm just going to summarize it briefly for you. Fundamentally, we're a party that believes in locally based decisions. We're very interested in freedom of choice, and we're very interested in respecting and supporting individuality. And we've made the following commitments. We've committed to more education funding. We've committed to more teachers teaching our children. We've committed to more schools where they are needed. We believe in more parental choice. And we believe in more student learning and assessment. And we believe, finally, in more support for students with special needs. Like every party, I think, we think that education is one of the key priorities of government, and Alberta students deserve our attention and our willingness to look out for their future and to make sure that they're best prepared to make Alberta a prosperous, happy, and healthy place in the future. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Marciano. Next, we'll go to Dr. Raj Sherman, the leader of the Alberta Liberal Party.
Thank you for this opportunity. Education of our children is one of the best investments society can make. Our parents were teachers. Children and I are products of a good public education system. I agree with choice, but within the public system, not a private system. Alberta's teachers educate and prepare our children and our province for a better future. To our teachers, a sincere thank you. My friends, we live in a global world. Countries that out-educate us today will outperform us tomorrow. We expect 100,000 more children in 10 years, and that's why we need sustainable, adequate funding. Keyword adequate for our education system, not underfunding. We need more teachers and more support for those teachers to deal with the diverse and special needs of our children. We not only need new schools, but also need to maintain the ones that we currently have. We need community-public partnerships where schools function as community hubs, a place for wraparound services like social work, resource officers, and public health, and a kitchen, and the library versus private-public partnerships. Alberta Liberals believe that the full cost of education must be borne by the Alberta government. We will end school fees, the tax on working families, and provide teachers with a $500 tax credit recognizing your personal cash contribution. In order to address our high school dropout rate, let's expand registered apprenticeship programs. Let's lower and eventually eliminate post-secondary tuition, de-link students from parental income, and allow student loans to be paid off if you live and work and pay taxes here. Fellow Albertans, we get what we pay for. It's time to raise taxes on the rich and large corporations to invest in public education. Thank you. Please look at albertaliberal.com for a comprehensive policy platform.
Thank you. That was Dr. Raj Sherman from the Alberta Liberal Party. Just a reminder to folks out there who may have just joined us that we'll be going to your questions soon. So if you do want to connect in with our system, just press 9 and you can speak to one of the operators there about the questions that you have. Next, for the opening statements, we have from the New Democrat Party, Mr. Darren Billis. Darren.
Thank you, Bill. I'd like to thank, first of all, the ATA for putting on this discussion this evening, and I'd like to thank all of you, my colleagues, for taking the time to discuss the state of education in Alberta. I'm honored to be here as your representative from the Alberta New Democrats, and in addition to being a candidate in Edmonton Beverly Clareview, I myself am a high school teacher. I've been teaching for 6 years downtown in the inner city, working with a variety of students, but especially those that come to the school with a variety of challenges and challenges. Education is a top priority for Alberta New Democrats, and we believe that schools are the heart of a community. Alberta is an incredibly prosperous province, and its prosperity belongs to all Albertans. That prosperity can afford us top-flight public services. Alberta New Democrats are the only party committed to a balanced plan that makes the prosperity work for everyone. An outstanding education system is an investment and a key part of sharing that prosperity. That's why the Alberta New Democrats have put forth a fully funded plan that will keep schools in mature neighborhoods open, provide lunch to kids in need, put an end to instructional fees, extend full-day kindergarten, and provide sustained, sufficient funding overall. Based on these important programs, New Democrats are the only party willing to collect a fair share of our prosperity from the oil sands, corporations, and wealthy Albertans. It's a plan that makes Alberta's prosperity work for everyone because Alberta belongs to you. I look forward to speaking with you in more detail about the Alberta New Democratic Education Plan.
Great. Thank you. That was Darren Billis from the Alberta New Democratic Party. And next we have Thomas Lukasik from the Progressive Conservative Association of Alberta. Thomas?
Well, thank you. I would like to start by thanking Carol Henderson, the President, not only for creating this opportunity, but for developing a really good working relationship with our government and our Premier, focused on public education. So thank you, Carol, to you. And also to all of you teachers who are listening in and will be participating for truly partnering and creating one of the best education systems, not only in Canada, but in the world, through the hard work that you do in the classroom. As you know, our Premier's commitment to education has already been shown in practice, and we do believe that the well-educated Albertans are truly the most important natural resource that this province has. Well, moving forward, we will continue focusing on our Education Act. As you know, it didn't come to pass in the last legislature, but we will be focused on the Act and making sure that all the great work that you have done together with the government on inspiring education, that will be legislated and implemented so our kids and our teachers can benefit from it in the classroom. We will continue with a 3-year cycle budgeting, which includes a significant investment in public education, and also focusing on special needs and realizing that not only children who are coded present themselves in our classroom with special needs, but that actually special needs is a much more broad issue that requires resources to be addressed and to give these children an opportunity to be successful in their educational experience. I have personally made a commitment, and our Premier confirms that commitment, that we will be focusing on the administrative workload burden that has been put on our teachers, both by school boards and by my ministry, to make sure that we leave you to do what you do best, and that's teach our kids in the classroom and not often be involved in paperwork that perhaps can be done either by others or can be done away with to begin with. I know that your workload is continuously growing and your demands on you are also increasing. We will be focusing on competence-based curriculum. It's something that we have already started, and I know you are very supportive of it, and I want to thank you for your collaboration. And also, obviously, very important, we will be focusing on making sure that we reach a good long-term collective agreement that is good for public education and ultimately good for our children. I will be addressing additional questions that you may have as we carry on. So thank you for participating again.
Great. Thank you, Minister Lukasik. So now we're going to be moving to the first of 3 themes for this evening's town hall discussion on education, and that's going to be focused on the question of education funding. So again, a reminder to those of you on the phone or those of you who have just joined us recently that if you have a question, then all you have to do is to press 9 and you'll be added into the queue, and one of our receptionists will be taking your question. Again, the first question should be about education policy, and then we will get to the other themes shortly. However, before we begin, there's an opportunity that we have to do a poll. We want to hear from you what you think are your number 1 issues. And so we have a poll question for you, and this one, of course, relates to education funding, and that's, which of the following issues related to education funding is most important to you? And I'm going to read out 6 options, And at the end of the 6 options, you're just to press one of the numbers on your phone here as to which of these is the top priority for you. And so we're really looking forward to hearing from the teachers across the province. So if your top option is for stable and adequate grant increases for schools, please press 1. Press 2 for increased funding for special needs students. Press 3 for funding directed at reducing class sizes. Press 4 for funding for full day and junior kindergarten. Press 5 for a review of funding for private schools. Press 6 if the top option is for infrastructure, increased funding for infrastructure. So all you have to do is press 1 through 6 on your phone, and then we'll get back to the results of the poll a little later on. So first, let's get a brief statement from each of the parties on education funding. Candidates, you will have only 1 minute each. I'll be a little stricter this time about the time frames on this. And we're going to start with Darren Billis from the New Democratic Party. Darren, you have 1 minute on education funding.
Thanks, Bill. The Alberta New Democrats believe that we should be, school boards should have long-term sustainable funding. And in that, we need to review our funding formula, our current funding formulas, to reflect Alberta today. We're committed to working with school boards to ensure that there is adequate and sustainable funding for the next 4 years, and to ensure that there's adequate funding of special needs students, especially when we're looking at inclusive education and English as an additional language. We're also looking at revising funding formulas to ensure vital schools in mature neighborhoods stay open. And, you know, it makes me think of when I had met with a few parents downtown in Edmonton when school closures were taking place, and they talked about how they moved into neighborhoods because of the school. And I do believe that schools are a hub of a community, and that we need to keep our mature neighborhoods or mature schools open.
Great. Thank you very much, Darren. Next, we'll hear from Raj Sherman with the Alberta Liberal Party.
Thank you. Today we have 650 fewer teachers than 2 years ago at a time when we have more children entering the system. The Alberta Liberals believe that we need sustainable, adequate funding. The current contract, the current commitment by Premier Redford of 1%, 2%, 2% for 3 years is sustainable, but it's underfunding of the system. It doesn't allow for cost of living, for population growth. The special needs of our kids are ever increasing. As I said, we need more teachers who need more support in those classrooms, and we need to address the infrastructure deficit as well. We must meet the 2003 Learning Commission report. The class sizes should not be based on averages, and we have to stop funding private education. Public tax dollars should be for public education. I make a commitment to raising taxes and funding public education appropriately. Thank you.
Thank you, Raj. Next, we're going to go to Victor Marciano with the Wild Rose Party. Victor, you have 1 minute for your position on education funding.
Thank you. Wild Rose is committed to more education funding. We think we can find tens of millions of new dollars to invest in education by cutting many of the wasteful spending decisions that are currently being made by government. We believe that government spending increases should be targeted towards frontline operations, and in healthcare that's nurses and doctors, and in education that's money pushed right to the classroom in teachers, teaching assistants, and support staff. As an example of that, when we put forward our alternate budget the day after the provincial government put forward their budget, we showed that we would be funding $114 million more towards teachers, teaching assistants, and support staff. That would be 1,425 new positions. We're committed to creating models where our school boards have long-term, sustainable, predictable funding, and where education funding in terms of capital decisions are made by formulas that are public and transparent, and where decisions about where new schools get built and where infrastructure and capital get spent are depoliticized and made in a transparent way that makes sense to everyday Albertans. Thank you.
Thank you, Victor. That's wonderful. And next we'll hear from Glenn Taylor from the Alberta Party.
Thank you, Bill. I actually agree partially with what Vitor just said about local decision-making. The Alberta Party has a very strong position on that. You know, the best education system requires stable, predictable, long-term funding. And the Alberta Party will prioritize funding for primary and post-secondary education so that our students can excel in a competitive world. But predictable funding doesn't necessarily mean adequate funding. And it's disrespectful that the current budget doesn't have any room for outcomes from collective bargaining with the Alberta Teachers Association over the next few years. And the special needs funding was frozen, so we're just now beginning to play catch-up. We're down hundreds of teachers, class size reductions have not been achieved, and we need to invest and reinvest in public education. And don't forget, we've got significant infrastructure needs as well. Some communities are growing at an incredible pace and desperately need new schools, but we also have to maintain the schools we have. So we need significant increases in the amount of money being allocated to maintain buildings so that we don't keep building new schools because we've let the old ones we have fall into disrepair. The Alberta Party also believes that we could bring communities to the table so that schools can become multi-use buildings, and municipalities will also have the advantage of helping keep schools open. You're welcome, Bill.
Thank you so much. That's great. And next we have Thomas Lukasik from the Progressive Conservative Association of Alberta. Thomas?
Well, thank you kindly. We have already shown, for the first time in the history of our province, we have unrolled a 3-year budget for Alberta education, which gives our school boards the ability to plan and hire and retain teachers not only year to year, but now they know what their funding will be, and it has grown from $6.8 billion, that's with a B, to $7.1 billion, which translates to approximately $36 million per school day. An additional $68 million has been added for inclusive education. We have also, so you are seeing a growth of approximately 3.6% annually in this 3-year cycle. We do realize that we need schools now. We have schools where we don't have kids, and we have kids where we don't have schools. So you will be seeing a significant injection of dollars for infrastructure, because to have the type of education that we have, which is phenomenal, it needs facilities that are adequate for this education to take place.
Great. Thank you, Thomas. We're now going to hear from you, and we've asked that people identify which party they would like to ask a question to. And the first questioner that we have is Ed from Edmonton, who has a question for Vitor Marciano from the Wild Rose Party. So, Ed, your question, please.
Yes, good evening. I'd like to ask the member of the Wild Rose Alliance. I know, my understanding, at least of the party, is less government is good government, firstly, and privatization seems to be the way that they want to go. So in relation to that, I'm just wondering, does the Wild Rose Alliance foresee, if they were to gain power, that they would disband the Alberta Teachers Association and therefore save a lot of money on teachers' salary because they seem to be against unions? And would that disbanding result in uncertificated professionals being in front of our young people in the province?
Thank you for that question. Vitor?
Let me state categorically that we have no intention of decertifying the Alberta Teachers Association. We have no opposition to unions. Myself, my academic training and my background is in labor relations. I'm one dissertation short of a PhD in labor relations, so I have a good understanding of collective bargaining and how unions work, and I view them as a positive contributor to society. Wild Rose has no intention of privatizing education. We have no intention of disbanding the teachers' union. We think that education is one of the places where government has a legitimate and important role in providing services to the public, and the question's just a non sequitur. It's a non-starter.
Okay, thank you for that response, Mr. Marciano. Next question is for the Alberta Party to Glenn Taylor. We have Carol from Calgary. So, Carol, can you ask your question, please?
Yes, hello. There are about 60,000 students in the province who are currently identified as the children of immigrants or refugees in the process of learning English or French as a second language. I'd like to know what your thoughts are about funding and specific supports for students in the context of inclusion?
Well, clearly, and thank you for the question, Carol. Clearly, we have to get a little bit better at developing and implementing strategies that involve all the relevant stakeholders to ensure that we have the programs in place that help children that have difficulty learning, whether it's English as a second language challenges, whether it's coming from a life of poverty, or whether or not they need special programs to be assisted with their learning difficulties. It's not one size fits all, and it has to have an open, inclusive learning concept in place that's adequately funded so that teachers have the supports they need so that children can learn at a rate that makes sense to them. Clearly, we're having a bit of a challenge right now in the province with the resources that teachers need in the classrooms, and this has to be addressed through a comprehensive strategy that recognizes the funding that are necessary to ensure that the teachers have the resources so that all of our students can learn and be included in the learning process here in Alberta.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Carroll, and thank you, Carol, for that question. Next, we have a question for Dr. Raj Sherman from the Liberal Party. Twyla from Edmonton. Twyla, your question, please, for Mr. Sherman.
With rural school enrollment declining and budgeting based on enrollment, what will you do to accommodate the educational needs of the rural students?
Well, Twyla, for rural Alberta, it's a major problem because we've got a lot of the young people leaving, and with the distances to travel and the number of kids declining, it's a major problem that we must address. I believe we need to bring education to rural Alberta in post-secondary institutions. Let's bring younger families here, encourage rural education, health science schools, and at the end of the day, we have to fund rural education. We have to make sure that the kids spend more time in the classroom than time on the bus. Technology is one tool to use, but it's a challenge, and it's going to involve the elected officials locally in rural Alberta. You know what the solutions are. The challenge that all policymakers face across the country. But I make a commitment to educate every child, having been grown up in a rural area myself.
Thank you, Mr. Sherman. And thank you, Twyla, for that question. So next we have a question for Darren Billis from the New Democrat Party, from Stephanie in Calgary. Stephanie, your question, please.
Hello?
Yes, hi, Stephanie. Go ahead with your question.
Hi there. I just want to address all of them, really, what their plan is to reduce class sizes from K all the way to grade 12, because I've been in all sorts of grades, and it's just creeping up more and more.
Thank you, Stephanie, for that question. First and foremost, the fact that our class sizes are still much larger than they should be just points to the fact that we've had the same political party in power for 40 years. And as an educator myself, I look at the fact that if we still haven't got this right, then it's time to elect a different party. First and foremost, there isn't an adequate amount of funding that's going into schools. Part of that is the fault of the funding formula. For example, especially in mature schools, the formula is still based on, or part of the formula is based on the school size. And so you've got mature schools being penalized for larger hallways, stairwells, and coat rooms, versus the newer schools that obviously are built differently and therefore benefit or have a greater benefit. And so, sorry, this minute has gone by really quickly. So we're talking about increasing our funding, which to schools, which I'm happy to talk about a little later on this evening, which would reduce class sizes. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Billis. Next, we have a question for Minister Lukasik from the Progressive Conservative Party from Lorette in Spruce Grove. So, Lorette, thank you for joining us this evening. What's your question for Minister Lukasik?
Hi. The recent education budget increased basic per pupil grants by 1%, but inflation is pegged this year at 2.3%. How do you expect school boards to maintain programs and staffing when grants do not cover the rising costs?
Well, that was the basic funding, but what you have to look at is overall. The overall funding is increasing by roughly 3.6% per year, for the next 3 years. As you know, funding in Alberta is rather interesting, where locally elected trustees get to reappropriate the dollars the moment they receive the budget. So overall, each school board will be receiving roughly an increase of 3.6% for the next 3 years. And they will be able to reappropriate those dollars how they see fit at the local level. So the basic funding is just one of the envelopes that is being sent to school boards, but they are receiving a multitude of other envelopes. And some, for example, like inclusive education, have seen an increase of 11%. So overall, 22% I should say. So overall, you're looking at an increase of 3.6% per student into every school board for the next 3 years following.
Thank you, Minister Lukasik. That's great. We now have set aside 5 minutes for what we're calling open discussion. This is an opportunity for candidates to respond to what they've heard from the responses to the questions and stuff. We're asking that you don't speak over top of each other, but we do want you to mix it up a little bit and to move forward. Just so people understand. So go ahead, Victor.
Thank you. It's Glenn, actually, with the Alberta Party.
Oh, I'm sorry, Glenn.
I think a piece that seems to be missing in the responses that I've heard so far this evening is that we have to focus on the learners so they can achieve their full potential. You know, education has to make the child the center of all of our decisions related to learning and education, which would relate to class size, which would relate to the condition of our schools, which would relate to the ability of our teachers and the resources they have to be successful. And we need to move back to a learner-focused system from the provincial government, rather than just numbers based on a budget based on, somebody in central education in Edmonton coming up with a number, and then we try to shoehorn it all in together. And it shouldn't be just before an election that we start coming up with solutions after we've had the Inspiring Education Report since 2010 and still haven't managed to get it implemented.
And I'm glad you say that this is Thomas Lukasik, because we actually have, and we're working in collaboration on this. I agree with you 100%. You know, one of the things we have to make sure, and work is already underway, to make sure that the dollars that actually are spent and invested in education find their way into the classroom. The amount of dollars that we actually spend on education is second to none anywhere, particularly in North America. But the fact is, the question is, are they finding their way into the classroom? So one of the things we have already started doing is to develop a more transparent budgeting process, not only for my ministry, but also for all the school boards, so that we can identify areas that perhaps eat up dollars that should otherwise find themselves into the classroom. Because I don't think anybody would argue that we are spending too little money. The question is the money finding itself where it should to you, the teacher, so you have the resources that you need to teach children? And I am the first one to tell you that I think that we can do better, and that's why we started some work already on it, to make sure that every dollar possible gets to the classroom and is not lost somewhere between my office and the school board, and so it doesn't find its way to the classroom.
And I appreciate that, Thomas, but our education of our children shouldn't be tied to the price of a barrel of oil.
Oh, let me get in here. Listen, Thomas, you were in cabinet. We have to stop the politicization of our education and our children's education. First, you and the Premier were part of cutting funding for education, a year before an election, and when it suited you, right, then suddenly we're going to put the funding back in. It's this unstable decision-making. That's the problem. Now, imagine if 30% of our kids, the other 30 who don't finish school, and they actually decided to finish grade 12. We would be more than 650 teachers behind today. We need to make the decisions on funding, not only for salaries. Teachers need to have the right wage. They need the right support, and the building in which that they work in, that our children are raised in, they need to be fixed. We have had systemic underfunding of our education system, and partly because of mismanagement of the health system and a lack of courage of the government to raise taxes.
If I can jump in, this is Darren Bills with the Alberta New Democrats. I mean, in addition to that, long-term sustainable funding also needs to be in place, not only for teachers, but as well for the supports that go along with teachers. And so, friends, I understand the burden of the fact that, or not the burden, but when we look at having more inclusive classrooms, which I think is a wonderful concept, there has to be the supports there for teachers, from the training to the additional supports that come with it, from teachers' aides to technology that's needed. And again, when we look at special needs, and hopefully we'll talk a little bit more about this, it is such a large envelope that includes such a large diversity of students that that needs to be examined when we're looking at the dollars going to schools and going to teachers to provide them with adequate resources in order to do the job that you want to do, that you're there to do.
So if I may interject, Thomas Lukavic here. Raj, what you're saying is interesting, but it's not very based. In fact, the fact is, if you want to look at commitment to public education, this government over the last few years has settled the teachers' unfunded pension liability, which was the right thing to do, and definitely offset some salary issues. We have had 4.5 years, which I would say were the best years in public education because of the long-term collective agreement we had, which was, I imagine, perceived to be fair by all involved. And we are now negotiating another long-term agreement. $7.1 billion is no spare change. The question again is are the dollars finding their way into the classroom? And that is something that I'm committed to making sure, because I want to make sure that the dollars that Albertans are investing, not spending, Raj, but investing in education, are benefiting our students, which ultimately obviously have to be in the classroom.
Well, Thomas, let's stick to facts. The fact is, yes, you provided the contract, but you started firing teachers the day after the election. The fact is we have the lowest high school completion rate in the nation, the lowest post-secondary participation rate in the nation, amongst the highest tuition and fees, and you're downloading fees, school fees on the working families. It's a regressive tax. The fact is you've underfunded and defunded the system.
Well, Raj, you're obviously...
Sorry, I'm just going to jump in. Victor Messiano has not had a chance to jump in here, and then we'll have to move on to the next theme. Victor?
So, ladies and gentlemen, the thought that jumps out to me is that of all the elements in the government's budget, education is probably the one that is the most predictable and easiest to plan. And I find it quaint that the minister is now talking that a government that's been in place for 40 years is now starting to look at finding ways to make sure that all of the money goes towards the front line, or as much of it as possible. So realistically, the system we have in this province for education was put together by this government, and they're now saying, well, now let's start to look at it and see if we can refine it and make it efficient. I think the government that created the inefficiencies is the one least likely to find a way to make it efficient.
Well, Dr. Marciano, I can't help but interject, but I find it very unusual that you would say that while the members of the Wild Rose fought a tooth and nail against settling teachers' unfunded pension liability, against increases in the budget towards education, and against its long-term collective agreement. So for you to say that you find that this government should have been investing in more predictable long-term way, while it is your members, Dr. Marciano, that have been actually the two main opponents in the legislature against all of those investments in education.
Thank you. We've extended the time there a little bit, but I found that very interesting and fun. It's good to have that engaged discussion. We do need to move on to the next theme of our three themes of the night. Before we move on, though, I just want to give everyone the results of the poll that we did earlier of all the teachers here. I find it quite fascinating. 19% of respondents said that stable and adequate grants increases for schools is what their top priority. 15% said increased funding for special needs students. 52% said funding directed at reducing class sizes, so that's obviously the biggest one there. 5% for full day in junior kindergarten, 4% for a review of funding for private schools, and 5% for more funding for infrastructure. Obviously, these are all very important issues, but it's fascinating to hear what your top priorities are. So next we're going to be moving on to education policy. And again, if you have questions, you can press 9 on your phone right now. And if you would think about a question specifically for one of the 5 political parties that have joined us this evening. So we're going to open it up again for a poll. We have a quick poll to ask you which of the following issues related to education policy is most important to you. And again, I'd ask you to listen to each of the 5 options before you, and then you can vote by pushing the button on your phone. So we have, first off, press 1 if the top issue for you is student bullying. Press 2 for provincial standardized tests. Press 3 for the role of chartered schools. Press 4 for integrating technology. And press 5 for transforming curriculum. So you can vote now by pressing one of those 5 buttons on your phone. I just want to let everyone know as well that we have over 10,000 teachers who are currently on the phone with us tonight. So a very impressive number. We're very excited to have you all joining us tonight. So we're going to give 1 minute each, again, to each of the political parties to talk to us about their stand on education policy. And we're going to start with the Alberta Liberal Party. Dr. Raj Sherman, you have 1 minute to talk to us about your education policy.
Well, at the 30,000-foot level, we need to have an education system that suits the needs of our children, the ever diverse needs. 21st century. Starting off with the infrastructure, the current infrastructure with the private-public partnerships does not allow us to fulfill that need of our children, the complex needs that our children face. With respect to student bullying, there's no room for bullying. Our children can't learn on an empty stomach. We need a provincial school lunch program. With provincial standardized testing, challenge with the testing currently in grades 3, 6, and 9, it stifles the innovation of the children, the special skills that they have, and the special teaching skills that the teachers have. We shouldn't be teaching to a test. We need to teach to the best abilities of the children. Technology is a major tool that we need to adapt into the classrooms, and I believe the curriculum needs to meet the needs of the children and families. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Raj. Next, we'll hear from Vitor Marciano from the Wild Rose Party. Vitor, you have 1 minute.
I'm going to limit my discussion sort of to 2 key areas. One of them is our belief that Wild Rose believes that there should be more parental choice in education. And we want to give principals and parent councils and individual schools more choice in selecting curriculum and teaching methods. We also want to encourage the establishment of new public charter and other not-for-profit independent schools, so long as these are open to all students and do not charge tuition. We think an increase in educational choices for parents and for their children is a good thing, and that's one of the things we believe in. The strong public schools are critical to our education system, but diversity is also a value and something that we should be thoughtful of. On the other element that we think is important is we believe in improved student learning and assessment, and we want to work with teachers and other educational experts to transition from the current system of provincial achievement testing to an assessment model that is more effective in evaluating student progress throughout the year and identifies areas of... Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much. Next, we're going to hear from Glenn Taylor from the Alberta Party. Glenn, you have 1 minute. Go ahead.
Bill, the Alberta Party believes in strengthening our education system is the key to a healthy and prosperous future. We are already considered a world leader in learning, but Alberta's education system must maximize our potential for success in an increasingly knowledge-based economy. Our education system has to be resilient, proactive, adaptive, and produce citizens with those skills. And critical thinking and a commitment to lifelong learning are necessities as technology, knowledge, industry evolve. And our Alberta Party policy speaks to recognizing and supporting a publicly funded education system that utilizes bold and innovative methods to facilitate learning. Because every student's potential is increased by personalized, individualized learning with the necessary supports and resources. We need to recognize strong, healthy relationships are critical to the development of vibrant, thriving individuals. And the Alberta Party, we aspire to establish a people-centered education system and create school-community linkages that support optimized learning. Throughout our policy, that's the vision that we hold forward, providing the necessary resources to implement the best aspects of the Inspiring Action Education Report, which has yet to be adopted and implemented.
Thank you, Mr. Taylor. Great. Thank you so much. Next, we're going to hear from Thomas Lukasik from the Progressive Conservative Association of Alberta.
Well, thank you. You will continue to have full commitment relevant to implementing all the great work that has been done by my predecessor, Minister Hancock, relevant to inspiring education. There is great work that was done and it must be implemented to improve learning in our province. Relevant to provincial achievement tests, again, you have a commitment that those tests will be revised in such a way that they will be used for formulating curriculum and continuously improving curriculum, but not assessing teachers, principals, superintendents, or frankly, students. That was not the intention, and we will devise a system that will not allow for this to happen, particularly by third parties like the Fraser Institute. We will continue our work on competency-based curriculum, which I will need your input and your assistance on implementing, and also the ever-challenging struggle with inclusive education, which obviously needs a lot of policy work and financial commitment.
Great. Thank you, Minister Lukasik. And next we'll hear from Darren Billis from the New Democrat Party. Darren?
Thank you. Alberta New Democrats acknowledge Alberta's diversity of needs, and we value publicly funded, publicly delivered education. We also recognize that the needs of rural schools are different from those of urban schools, and therefore support and structure needs to be very specific versus one-size-fits-all. Alberta New Democrats view education as an investment, whereas, in my view, the Tories view education as a cost. And so in order to ensure that Alberta stays on the cutting edge and that we move forward, we need to invest the dollars today so that we are competitive tomorrow. We also believe that teachers, that you need the resources to be successful and the supports that come with that. And as far as some of our stances, we don't believe in grade 3 and 6 provincial provincial achievement exams. We would rather see diagnostic assessments taking place so that we identify exactly what the needs are of the students so that we can work with them to help them to be successful.
Thank you, Mr. Billis. Okay. Now it's a chance to hear from the teachers across the province. Once again, callers, keep your questions very short and direct to one of the political parties that we have here. So our first question is for Raj Sherman of the Liberal Party, and it comes from Sandra in Whitecourt. So Sandra, your question for Mr. Sherman, please. Sandra, go ahead. We have Sandra in Whitecourt? No, maybe Sandra.
We have Art in Whitecourt.
Okay, we'll go with that if your question is for Mr. Sherman. Go ahead, please.
Hello. Yes,
go ahead,
my question is in regards to authentic assessment. Yes, research on authentic assessment does not support standardized testing. What will your party do to address this disconnect?
Wait, Art, can you come again there, please?
Authentic. Yes, research on authentic assessment. Yes, research on authentic assessment does not support standardized testing. What will your party do to address this disconnect?
Well, Art, with respect to standardized testing, I believe we need to get, for grade 12, standardized testing is a good thing. But the reality is, the needs of the children, and they come from many different communities and have many different individual needs. To do standardized assessments early on in life, it doesn't make sense. It doesn't meet the needs of the community or the child. So the reality is we need to have the experts, you the teachers, help design the policy. And we need to look at evidence-based policy. And I believe that the policy that the current government has had over the past years hasn't been evidence-based policy, and we have to change course.
Great. Okay. Thank you for that, Raj. The next question we have is for Darren Billis from the New Democrat Party. Marco is up in Fort McMurray. Marco, your question for Mr. Billis, please. Go ahead.
Yes, thank you very much, everyone. My question is, what is your position with Bill number 2 that was dissolved after the second reading, in particular to section number 16, which refers to adding the human rights section?
That's a great question, Marco, and I need, can you give me a little more clarification?
Well, sorry, we've disconnected through the system, so the question is in relation to Bill 2 and addition of human rights into the... Yes. Okay, so Mr. Billis?
Oh, boy. Okay, well, thanks, Marco, for that question. So adding the human rights portion to the Education Act. Need more clarification, I'm sorry.
Yeah, go ahead. If I may, Thomas Lukazik, as everybody knows, we have added the wording of human rights legislation into Bill 2, and that simply is consistent with how legislation needs to be drawn, considering the fact that we have a charter and we have human rights, and I think as Albertans we fundamentally believe that education should be focused on upholding human rights and eradicating anything that would fly in the face of it. So we have included that in the charter, and obviously it was met with vigorous opposition. I would like Dr. Marciano to speak to that. But that was one of the principles on which Bill 2 has failed. But you have full commitment from our government that this bill will be reintroduced and passed, as it is one of the most progressive pieces of legislation in education, not only in Canada, but I would argue worldwide. But I'm sorry for stepping in. I'll give my colleague maybe a chance to answer the next question that was addressed to me.
Well, thank you for answering that, Mr. Lukazik.
No, that's good. I think what we'll do is we'll flip the questions around, and we'll appreciate the support there, the cross-party.
Oh, yeah, we actually like each other.
Well, that's good. I know. It's all in the same business together. That's great. We appreciate that, and it's a really good question. So what we'll do, actually, we have a question from Carmen in St. Paul. And given what's just happened here, I think we'll put this back to Mr. Billis if we could, even though it was originally intended for the Progressive Conservative Party. So, Carmen in St. Paul, your question, please.
Hi. I'm just wondering if and when the weightings for diploma exams are going to be able to get dropped, and I'm just wondering how long is it going to take before we remove provincial achievement tests for grades 3 and 6?
I mean, I can weigh in very quickly, Carmen, on the Alberta New Democratic policy on this. And so again, we're talking about removing provincial achievement exams for grades 3 and 6 and using those dollars instead to look at diagnostic exams. I can tell you that as a high school teacher, and I've taught both English 30 and Social 30, that an exam that carries the weight of 50% is completely absurd, considering that mark then follows the student and determines whether they get accepted into post-secondary programs or not for the rest of their lives. I think for grade 12, standardized exams have their place, but we have the highest weighting in the country, and that definitely needs to be reduced. But I will let now my colleague, Mr. Lukazik, answer that from...
Sure, let's mix this up a little bit here.
Well, yeah, thank you. This is a really tough one that I have to tell you I'm struggling with, but I will be making that decision very shortly. Ironically, research shows, particularly most recent from Saskatchewan, that our marks that we end up assigning together, you the teachers in the classroom, and then you the teachers through writing those tests and marking those tests, jointly, we have the most accurate final mark of any in Canada. But I'm being told over and over that they impose a great deal of stress on our students. I am 100% open to changing the weighing just to make sure that, however, to make sure that the test continues to be accurate. We don't want our students' marks to be padded, as we've seen in Ontario. So that will be a decision made, and I already have reached out to ATA to assist me in how we can get our students accurate marks and diminish some of that stress that is placed upon them.
Okay. Well, Thomas, the Alberta Party, if you're 100% open, certainly has some suggestions about how you could replace those assessment and accountability measures.
Thank you, Mr. Marciano. We're going to go to Mr. Taylor. We're going to the next question, which is coming to you, Mr. Taylor. So we have Desiree and Lethbridge for a question for Glenn Taylor from the Alberta Party. Desiree, go ahead, please.
Hi there. My question is, will they continue public funding of private and charter schools, which are about 5 to 8% of the student body, even though some of them don't even uphold the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms and are not inclusive or respect diversity?
Okay, Mr. Taylor,
thank you for that question. Is that for my response then?
That's correct, yes.
Okay, thank you. We believe it should be decreased, that most Albertans aren't aware and don't feel that it's entirely fair, and when they're informed, they believe that it's really not fair at all. Most assume that parents are paying for most of it when it's private. I don't have the specific percentages, but definitely feel that 70% is too high. So we need to start reducing it. Private students can go to private schools that are based on private funding, and we need to start removing the government portion from the contribution to that education. Certainly, we need to be giving greater support to the public school system because we have a very efficient public school system when it's properly funded.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Taylor. Next, we have a question for Mr. Marciano from the Wild Rose Alliance Party from Phil in Eckville. Phil, your question for Mr. Marciano, please.
Hello. In the past, the Wild Rose Alliance has stated in their platform in their early years that they were in favor of increasing standardized testing. I was hoping you could comment on that, if that is still the case. I'm a little unclear with what you're saying in your opening proposal or opening position, and if you're possibly looking in the future of linking teacher pay to standardized testing results.
Let me start with the second part first. There's no intention of linking teacher pay to standardized testing results. The position of our party is that we are satisfied with standardized testing at the grade 12 level. We think the grade 12 level departmental exams, that model is working, and I agree with Minister Lukaszak that we seem to have a very good predictability of the results, and that our results are not suffering from some of the problems that exist in other provinces. With regards to provincial achievement tests at grade 3 and grade 6 level, we are prepared to work with ATA and experts to rework them. We think the exams could use some reworking. We don't think that they're properly set up to capture all of the elements that we think they should capture, and that they should be trying to identify areas of concern for the student level. Now, that puts me in a very different position, say, than Minister Lukaszak, who thinks that there are really exercises in curriculum development and curriculum understanding. We think that it's important they be about student assessment, but we think that there's room to improve those models. As a general rule, as a party and our members and our caucus, we believe that there is value in standardized testing, and that there's usefulness for parents, but that they have to be used properly, and there's still some work to be done on improving how it's done.
Thank you, Mr. Marciano. That's great. Thank you so much. Okay. So now we're going to move to another 5-minute open period. Again, I'd like to make sure that all 5 parties get an opportunity to respond to what they've heard from some of the other parties. We'll keep it to 5 minutes this time, hopefully. Again, don't speak over top of each other. Maybe because Mr. Marciano was last getting into and you're both here on the phone. If Mr. Marciano, do you want to start off the 5-minute open discussion?
Well, there aren't too many things that I think distinguish us from the parties on this. I mean, by and large, I think Alberta's done a good job with educational policy. But one of the things that I've heard that I'm going to disagree with some of the other parties on is sort of the appropriate level for funding for private schools. A very small percentage of Alberta students are outside the public system, less than 5%. And the current model that has 70% of the operating grant following them and nothing else, I think that that's actually a good model. It actually saves money for the public system. Those students who are outside the public system, 30% of the money that would normally flow to them isn't flowing to them, and it's staying in the public system. Those parents pay school taxes just like every other parent. So I think that allowing for some diversity in educational choices is a good thing. I think that the 4 or 5% of parents who choose to have or the 4 or 5% of students who are outside the public system is a small enough number not to put any undue pressure or strain on the system, and then in the long run it's good for development that way.
Thank you, Mr. Marciano. Mr. Taylor, do you want to respond to that? Taylor?
Sorry, I was finding the mute button there. Not for you, Mr. Marciano, from on my telephone. Very good. And we'd have to, of course, disagree. Heavy investments in public schools in Finland have proven a great success. Throughout the world where we have a strong public school system supported by public dollars, and certainly we tend to show that we've got also great results coming out of it. The concern that the Alberta Party has is that we've commissioned way too many studies through various iterations of Mr. Lukaszak's department, not just under Mr. Lukasic, of course, but former ministers as well. Where we go out, we consult with Albertans, we put together plans, we have the teachers come to the table, we have the administrators come to the table, we have the students and their parents engaged. We prepare a report, and then it sits on the shelf in languages. What we need is a political will to implement the reports once we've heard from Albertans what's in our best interest. And clearly Albertans are saying we need better funding models, we need more investment in public education, and we need to ensure that we have a base understanding that it has to be learner-centered, which means that teachers also have to have the resources to deliver on what parents are looking for in the education system. So we do have a fundamental disagreement there with the Wild Rose Party. I'll leave it at that.
Thanks, Mr. Taylor.
With all respect to the two conservative parties here, $192 million would go a long way to making up for the shortfall of 650 teachers today that we had compared to 2 years ago. Plus, we probably need an extra 450 on top of that, in addition to the support. $192 million, if you factored in the average cost, say $100,000, and that's maximizing it, for a new teacher with all the benefits and everything else that goes along. That's 1,900 new staff at $100,000 each year. That is a significant for public education.
Dr. Sherman,
challenge for the education system.
Dr. Sherman, you're missing something, because if the 70% operating grant were to go away for students who are outside the public system, many of them would come back into the public system, and then we would be paid for 100% of their operating expenses out of the public system. So don't assume that by reducing the grant to the public system that you'll actually throw more money per student back into the public system. It's the exact opposite. These are students who we're getting at a 30% discount, and we're not paying for any of their buildings or any of their infrastructure.
Because our students aren't craft dinner to be discounted. The first student in a school costs about $10 million. But if you have the last 10 students out of 1,000, the cost for those last 20 or 30 is minimal because the fixed costs are already looked after. Any business person would have a brain would know that.
I'm going to let Catholic jump in here. Well, I never thought the word discount would come into this conversation, but it's interesting nonetheless. You know, to my colleague from Alberta Party, I want to apologize for the consultation we've done. The last 4.5 years have been, as I said earlier, the best in education. Finally, we focused on discussing what should be, and that's children in the classroom. And all this work that was done on inspiring education, transformative education, competency-based curriculum, and bullying, all that was in Bill 2, and unfortunately, it was not allowed to pass in the legislature just a few weeks ago. But we will be implementing it again through reintroducing that bill, because there was a lot of work and sweat put in, not only by teachers but also by parents and students, like you indicated. And it would be a shame if all that truly, like you say, was left alone. So you have a full commitment, not only from myself, but definitely from our Premier, to put that back on the floor of the legislature and have our new colleagues in the chamber debate it and pass it this time. Our kids deserve it, and it would take our education to where it needs to be in 21st century.
And Mr. Lukasic, okay, well, thank you. You're not looking for an apology at all. It's really about, if you can't get it passed with the size of majority that the PCs had in the last legislative system, then I don't believe you'll be able to get any significant legislation passed. And it's gone to the table twice and not passed both times.
Well, I have to cut in on this one. I think all my colleagues around this table will agree with me. Majority, as you may know, had nothing to do with it. We needed a unanimous consent to continue debating this bill for 4 more hours and pass it.
Minister Lukasic, your own party filibustered the bill on the Wednesday before the House stopped sitting. Your own party filibustered for a day.
It's quite amusing, Dr. Marciano, that you would pipe up, because all the parties in the legislature, Liberals, NDP, Independents, and Progressive Conservatives, agreed to work as long as we had to that day and pass it. Unfortunately, it was coincidentally, I would imagine, your party that blocked it by not giving it the unanimous consent.
Allow me to be the voice of reason here. First of all, Minister Hancock actually did a lot of good work, and a lot of fine people put a ton of work into the Inspiring Education Report. I was at that convention, and we should have passed this at that time. Minister Lukasic is partly right, and Vitor is partly right. In fact, Minister Lukasic offered up amendments to his own bill and filibustered his own bill the night before, and they canceled the sitting on Thursday evening. The government could have passed this bill. But unfortunately, they're blaming the Wild Rose for ending it. The government could have passed it. They shouldn't have canceled the Thursday evening meeting, Minister. And you shouldn't have started offering amendments to your own bill.
This is getting good.
I know. I don't want to cut it off.
But let's be honest. The reason amendments were filed is because not only our teachers, but trustees and parents from our Catholic community raised some really good issues. And those issues were raised literally last minute, and they were introduced in amendments. And I have to actually thank everybody, other than the voice that has been piping up, that all members of all parties agreed to pass these amendments. They were not complicated amendments, and there was a lot of collaboration in the chamber because everybody knew this is about education. But unfortunately, you know what? Let bygones be bygones. That we will reintroduce it, and we'll have another chance to pass it in the new legislature.
Okay, well, thank you. That was very fun. It was good to have that heated exchange there around this very important question. We do need to move on to our final of the three main themes tonight. But before we do that, I do want to give everyone the results of the poll that we did on what your priorities are. And so we'll just let you know that when it comes to education policy, the most important issues for folks, 11% said it was student bullying, 36% talked about provincial standardized tests, 8% talked about the role of chartered schools, 19% was about integrating technology, and 25% said it was transforming curriculum. So it's kind of interesting crossover of supports there. So now, thank you to all the teachers who are still out there listening and who are wanting to get your questions asked. Again, if you do have a question on the next theme, which is about the teaching profession, this is your opportunity to pose a question to one of the 5 political parties that are debating here tonight. And to do that, you press 9. And then you'll be talking to one of the people and add it into the queue. With over 10,000 teachers on the phone, please be patient, trying to get through. As we've done already twice before, we're going to go to another poll question, though, before allowing each of the parties for their 1-minute piece on the teaching profession. So, we want to hear from you. Which of the following issues related to the teaching profession is most important to you? So there's 5 choices. Listen to them, and then you can make your vote, please. So press 1 for preserving teacher collective bargaining rights. Press 2 for improving teacher retention. Press 3 for addressing teacher workload issues. Press 4 for improving professional development opportunities, and press 5 for maintaining a collegial profession. So we'll give you the results of those a little bit later on. But so now we want to hear from each of the parties. Candidates, again, you will have 1 minute each. And we're going to start with Vitor Marciano from the Wild Rose Party. So Vitor, you have 1 minute, please.
Let me start off by saying, by expressing a sentiment which I'm sure will be echoed by everyone of here representing political parties. We have tremendous teachers in Alberta, and the work you do is so critically important, and it's extremely highly valued. The overwhelming majority of Alberta's teachers are excellent, and they deserve our full support. And as a parent, I know that I really appreciate the work my 5-year-old teacher puts into her kindergarten class, and I think that'll go for everybody across the board. The profession has served Alberta well, and generally there aren't very many issues that I think are important. One of the ones that we've brought up is that we do want to ensure that there's continued local autonomy, so we want to increase the role of school boards, and that Wild Rose is committed towards moving collective bargaining back to the local level and away from provincial bargaining. We think in the long run that actually solves problems with teacher retention and allows local school boards to make decisions that have more significant local impact, and it leads to a better education model, to a more sustainable teaching model, to models where I think teachers will be happier in their communities.
Thank you, Mr. Marciano.
Where the profession grows.
Great. Thank you very much. Next, we'll hear from Glenn Taylor from the Alberta Party. Glenn, you have 1 minute.
Thank you, Bill. My mother was a teacher, actually, and while we didn't have a lot of money growing up, I did watch my mom come home from work on a regular basis, exhausted. She taught grade 5. She also filled in part-time as librarian as we moved around. I can't think of something more important than ensuring that we have enough teachers to make sure that we have lower class sizes and that the teachers' workload will be such that they can actually engage on a relevant basis with the students that are in front of them. So that means that we need to invest in more teachers, and we need to invest in more adequate resources for the teachers to ensure that their workload is something that can be borne. You know, too many people think that it's 8 o'clock to 3 o'clock and you're out and then done for the summer. I know differently than that. I've seen teachers that have been dedicated to their profession burning out, and we need to recognize that as a real challenge within the profession. Therefore, the Alberta Party will invest in and explore along with the teachers initiatives that support the teachers in the profession through a coordinated approach to addressing this challenge.
Thank you, Mr. Taylor. Next, we're going to hear from Thomas Lukasik from the Progressive Conservative Association of Alberta. Thomas?
Thank you kindly. One of the things that not only do I hear on a continuous basis, but I know it to be true, is that teachers' workload has grown significantly and continues to grow. And irrelevant of our bargaining, I have made a commitment to ATA, and I will deliver on this commitment to do a thorough review of teacher workload in the province. And I know that there is a great deal of work that is downloaded upon you all the way from my department down to school boards and then your local administration in the school. And I want to make sure that we eliminate as much of it as possible, find any duplications, so that you can spend your time preparing for classes and then delivering your lessons in classes, because that is what you do best, and that is what our students and parents want you to do. Also, I want to make sure that you have appropriate professional development. The face of classroom has changed significantly, not only through immigration but through technology. I want you to have professional development that is adequate, that prepares you for the classroom of today. And unlike Wild Rose, we are committed to bargaining on a province-wide basis so we can have a long-term agreement so we can focus on education and not on labor issues. Thank you. Sorry.
No, that's okay. Thank you, Mr. Plastic. Next, we'll hear from Darren Billis from the New Democrat Party. Darren, you have 1 minute.
Thank you very much. Well, I mean, as a teacher myself, I know the tremendous work that you all go through on a daily basis. And that the work that you do and your commitment is extraordinary. And we, as politicians, need to value the work that you are doing, and acknowledge the fact that as teachers you do much more than just teach. I mean, from the hours to the extra commitments to after school, before school, etc. And so we as teachers need the time and training in order to deliver the curriculum in innovative ways. I mean, I myself became a teacher because I believe that young people deserve a bright future, and I'm committed toward working to that end, as I am sure most of you are as well. And so, we need to acknowledge that we have placed more work on teachers, especially when we look at the challenges that you face, including having more inclusive classrooms, and need to value you in the classroom with support in many different ways.
Thank you, Mr. Billis from the New Democrat Party. And next we'll hear from Raj Sherman from the Alberta Liberal Party.
As a parent to a son who's in grade 12 who isn't happy about 40 kids in his math class and how testing is done, and is also as a physician who ends up dealing with the diverse medical needs of young people, I understand the challenges that the teachers face. As teachers, you are not only teacher, but you're the school nurse, you're the social worker, the counselor, you're the parent, you're the police officer. You need to do what you're trained to do, which is to teach your children. And you need those supports within the school system. With the diverse needs of our population, with immigration, with the needs of the Indigenous kids, and a lot of poverty right now that's happening in our society, especially in inner city schools. We need to provide what's best for the students and the teachers in the learning environment. We need to also, to give you a bit of a break, and we need to educate the educators. It needs to be a priority not only do you need a good wage to do your job, but you need the respect, and these issues need to be a priority. The workload issues and your professional development. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Sherman. Okay, now we're going to go again to the teachers out there. We have a number of teachers lined up with questions for each of the political parties. The first one is one that we got via email. It's from Dave in Grand Prairie, and it goes to Darren Billis from the New Democrat Party. It says, the student population is expected to grow by 100,000 students over the next 10 years. What ideas do you have for attracting more teachers to the profession? How can we make sure that there are enough teachers in rural areas in particular? Mr. Billis?
Well, thanks, Dave, for that question, and that is a great question. I think, part of attracting and retaining teachers is, again, taking a close look at the workload that we're placing on teachers. One of my frustrations as a teacher is seeing that many of the supports that help you to be successful are the first things that are on the chopping block. And so whether we're talking about, librarians, school counselors, teachers' aides, etc., those folks in the roles that they play are quite crucial in helping you and us to do the job that we want to do and that we're expected to do. And so I think, when we're looking at attracting teachers, the answer to this is quite longfold, because I think, teachers need to be valued through the salaries that they earn, but we also need to recognize that, on the whole, our province needs to look at long-term sustainable growth as opposed to more of a boom-bust, and there are folks that are unfortunately deciding to teach elsewhere because costs keep going up and up and up and up. And so I'm getting the signal to wrap up here, but I think that there's much that needs to be done, and we need to look at the long term as far as schools and ensuring that our community schools stay open.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Billis. Next, we have a question for the Progressive Conservatives Association, Minister Lukasik, from Frederick in Calgary. Frederick, your question for Minister Lukasik, please.
Yes, the PC candidate seems to be in favor of a provincial agreement with Alberta teachers. So my question to him is, in your view, what are the building blocks of a fair collective agreement with Alberta teachers?
Thank you. That's a really good question. And, and I'm a little bit handicapped because I have to be very cautious what I say, because as I'm speaking to you, there is actual bargaining going on, and I would hate to prejudice any one of us around that table. But the last 4.5 years, as I mentioned earlier, were really good for education. We sat as partners in education around the same table, and we talked about students and curriculum and all that great stuff that happened and ultimately culminated in Bill 2. I would love to see that again, because that is what makes good education system. Obviously, remuneration, salary is important, but I think the most important thing that we need to look at, and I again alluded to it earlier, is the workload that teachers are facing. You are facing assignments and tasks that perhaps young teachers who just graduated from our faculties of education did not anticipate having to face. And I am looking at streamlining some of that. I'm repeating myself, but that's because it is so important. I want to see as much of your time in front of students, because that's when students get the best education, and eliminating some of the paperwork and individualized plans that you are making for students and all that, which perhaps has very limited, if any, educational value. And that, I think, needs to be embraced in our collective agreement.
Great. Thank you, Minister Lukasik. Probably good to be cautious as well, being that we have you locked in the top floor of the ATA. Next question is to Glenn Taylor from the Alberta Party, and again, this one's come in from the emails, and it comes from Michelle in Medicine Hat. So, Glenn, Michelle is asking you, I get so many extra projects from my principal and from my superintendent that I don't have the time to do planning or make proper assessments or prepare individualized lesson plans. I can't continue to work 60 hours per week. Should teachers be able to negotiate instructional time in their contracts? Mr. Taylor, you have 1 minute.
Well, again, going back to the Alberta Party policy that we believe we need to be more learner-centered when it comes to developing education policy, absolutely. There should be discussions at the bargaining table about exactly that matter. Teachers need to be in front of their students. Developing the curriculum and certainly, the opportunity and ability to ensure that you have specific learning opportunities for specific students only makes sense. But it shouldn't be 60 hours a week in total time all in. Because then you're not at your best when you're in front of students. So we have to have a better plan of how we prepare for the classroom, the resources that you have to get to the classroom, and ensure that we're in front of the learners with the best programs possible, the best teaching aids possible, so that we're focused on the learners and their needs, so that we can develop young Albertans to be good citizens of this province. So I would say there's absolutely no sense at all in a 60-hour work week when really your focus should be on the learners.
Thank you much, Mr. Taylor. The next question is for Vitor Marciano from the Wild Rose Party. We have Don on the line from Grand Prairie. Don, your question for the Wild Rose Party, please.
Hi. You stated that collective bargaining is important, and with that comes the right to strike. Do you believe that teachers have the right to strike? And what actions would your government take in response to a labor dispute between teachers and their board?
Well, I think that the right to strike is certainly much more available to teachers when you have local bargaining. And I think that we've created a circumstance with province-wide bargaining where any government would feel pressured almost immediately to curtail a strike. And ultimately, that's not a good position for teachers or for parents or for school boards. Our current system right now has the province negotiating centrally on behalf of teachers, coming to an agreement, and yes, the school boards are at the table, but ultimately they're the takers of the agreement. And if you look at what happened in 2010, you get a very clear picture of that. The province and the teachers came to an agreement. The school boards weren't given enough money to, in effect, implement the agreement, so that you had a significant layoff of teachers, you had class sizes grow, you had the system not work properly. We think in the long run, moving back to local bargaining allows for better decisions on the part of school boards. It allows for the give and take of negotiations to reflect it. And frankly, I think in the long run, it probably solves some of the other issues that have been raised on some of the other questions in terms of workload and the number of hours that are put into work. It's something that should be negotiated at a school board by school board level. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Marciano. Next, we have a question for Ross Sherman from the Alberta Liberal Party from Jen in Beaumont. Jen, your question, please, for Mr. Sherman.
Hi there. I was just wondering when the last time was that any of you, or you in particular, was actually in a classroom, that you were able to see what happens and where some of our struggles lie as professionals.
Sherman?
Well, Jen, for me, it was probably a few years ago. I had a daughter who was 20 and a son who was 17. Oh, geez, it was probably when my kids were in junior high in McKernan School in Edmonton. I'm not a teacher. I teach at the university. I'm not a kid. I have no personal experience other than as a student and as a parent with the school system. So a lot of what I know, I hear from my friends who are teachers and the group of children that I've coached through soccer and basketball. I hear directly for them and my own children. I do know that teachers are facing a lot of challenges. You have immense pressures, and you're asked to perform. And to be honest, you've heard a lot of rhetoric from the government, from the politicians, and I was in the governing party, and you're looking for someone just to make the right decision. And these right decisions are getting you appropriate funding for the right number of teachers, getting you the support that you need, and getting your schools fixed up. And the government policy with respect to Bill 44 was not good in your favor. Government policy with respect to private-public partnerships for the future, school of the future, is not in your favor. And I personally make a commitment to include you in the decision-making and stop having meetings and not making decisions.
Thank you, Mr. Sherman. Okay. Well, I think that's a good segue into our 5-minute open discussion there. Again, don't overtalk on each other, but perhaps, Mr. Bill, if you didn't get in the last round, you want to jump off on this open discussion?
Yeah, I would love to. Thank you. I'd love to get back to the issue of collective bargaining, which I think is a tool and absolutely necessary, and that teachers deserve to have the right to strike. I think all workers should, being that is a tool that's used, at certain times if the other parties aren't willing to come to the table. And so I think, I disagree with our Wild Rose friend arguing about individual boards bargaining, which I think kind of goes against the idea of collective bargaining. And so you have a whole bunch of individual boards fragmented versus one unified voice, which the Alberta Democrats stand behind. And so I think part of the issue is the fact that in Alberta we have some of the most archaic labor laws in the country. And so, there are things like binding arbitration that exist in other provinces. There are, obviously the right to strike, the right to organize, and I think that we need to address some of these issues and ensure that we're valuing the workers, teachers, and the people that basically are the economic engine of this province.
Others, you want to jump in, Mr. Taylor?
Well, thank you. Actually, I don't disagree with what my New Democrat colleague had to say. The Alberta Party believes in the workers' rights and collective bargaining, and the process needs to be, it's evolved to a province-wide process, and that's where it should be, so we have equitable agreements across the province. But I would like to get back to this question regarding experience in the classroom. We shouldn't be hiring or electing MLAs that think they have all the answers and all the experience and all the expertise. The Alberta Party believes that the best answers come from the people that are actively engaged in the delivery of the service. We should be bringing to the legislature people that aren't afraid to ask the tough questions and involve the people that have the answers based on their expertise, their experience, and their knowledge at a local level. So I wouldn't suggest, and the Alberta Party wouldn't suggest at all, that we have the answers. What we do know is how to ask the right questions so that we can build that into policy that reflects the realities in the classroom today. Not necessarily the realities in the classroom from 20 years ago, but also be brave enough to look at what we believe to be coming down the road as we start to look at new technologies, as we start to look at new ways of helping children learn. Because really, I think what's happening here with the advent of, Google and research is how do we teach children to learn? And how do we teach them to find their own answers? We're not all repositories of knowledge where we can come up and just, recite by rote, as nice as that might have been at one time. Now it's more about how do we become teaching good citizens, good skills so that they can learn in a continuous basis throughout their lives.
Taylor, others?
Thank you, Thomas Lukazik here. Maybe I'll answer the earlier question from Jen. When was the last time I was in classroom? Well, every morning I drop off my daughter at grade 7, so I get to speak with a number of teachers there. But some of you may know I am a teacher. My classroom experience is rather limited, as I haven't taught for a long time, but I do have my degree in education. And that definitely helps me to do my job because I have the understanding of the profession. But when the question was, should teachers strike? We in Alberta have developed a relationship between the school boards and ATA and this government that frankly this question is rather irrelevant because we have developed a very collaborative partnership in education with a great deal of respect. And I'm finding that right now actually at the table where negotiations are taking place. And I am very confident that all three parties are focused on what's best for kids, what's best for public education. So the right to or not to strike is frankly irrelevant. And I think the less we talk about it, the better it is for all of us around the table and for our kids. Province-wide bargaining is important. That's what brings equity into the system. That's what allows all teachers to be on the same standing. And again, it allows us to continuously focus on the dialogue based on education. But one of the important issues that we need to address, and we already made some headway, and I have made some early announcements, is the support staff. And my colleague from NDP rightfully brings that up. Support staff in our schools are irreplaceable. The proper number of teaching assistants, and as you know, I've been talking about the idea of bringing nurses back into school. Counselors and librarians, that is indispensable, and I think those are the kinds of dialogues that we need to engage in to make sure that U.S. teachers have the support, but kids ultimately have the right support in the classroom. So it's the blend, the mix of staffing in schools that is so critical.
I guess this leads to a question for Minister Lukaszuk, is that is he going to commit to having enough funding flowing to the school boards so that they'll be able to meet the requirements of the contract that gets negotiated with the ATA? Because negotiating a contract with the ATA and then underfunding the school boards and laying off teachers becomes a significant problem.
Well, let me answer that question, Dr. Marciano. The fact is, yes, if we are sitting at that table and negotiating that contract, then obviously we will step up with the dollars. If we follow your model, where we have 62 school boards negotiating their 62 agreements, and then coming back to the minister's office one by one saying, now pay for this, pay for that, that's when you have instability in education. That's when you have turmoil, and that's when you have 62 sets of teachers getting paid different salaries, working different hours. That is not conducive to good public education. So, yes.
But Minister, you didn't fund those school boards in 2008, 2009, 2010.
Allow me to step in here again. The reality is, as policymakers, our job is to manage your money. The number one spending issue in the nation is healthcare. It's eating every minute. It's already eating breakfast and lunch, and it's working on dinner salad. Education is being underfunded. One, because healthcare has been mismanaged. Secondly, on the income side, our education of our children has to stop depending on the price of a barrel of oil. Governments need sustainable, predictable funding, income coming in order to give sustainable, predictable funding. And this is why the elephant in the room, the two conservative parties have made lots of promises, but they're not discussing the issue of where the money's going to come from. We've got to raise taxes on the big corporations, and we got to see what the needs of an education system are, what that's going to cost, stop funding private education with public tax dollars, fund public education with public tax dollars, and you got to raise taxes on the wealthiest, 10% of big corporations to pay for the teachers and the supports and the schools that we need. And in order to get these supports, we got to stop with this private-public partnership, because you need schools as community hubs in which to house the supports that the school nurses and the social workers and the teachers need. So, Thomas, there's a lot of talk and a lot of rhetoric, but little action. And we commit to fixing the education system and funding it.
I'll open it up for another 30, 40 seconds. Well, this is good, Raj, that you're supporting our policy, because actually I have been talking about it, and you will be hearing much more about it soon. We are looking at a model of building schools, not only just a school, but as hubs with all the wraparound services for our students during daytime and for the community after school hours. That is the way to build schools, and stay tuned. However, our funding commitment has definitely been significant, because we do see education as an investment and not an expenditure. Look at the amount of dollars, but I have to reiterate what I have said on a number of occasions. We have to make sure, and this will be done collectively with ATA, school boards, and my office, we have to make sure that every possible dollar finds its way all the way down to the classroom. And that may mean also not hiring additional teachers, but it may mean looking at additional TAs or librarians or counselors or nurses, whatever support staff is needed in the classroom.
All right, and Mr. Lukaszuk, one of my concerns, and what residents of Beverly Clearview are telling me, is all of our mature schools that are in danger of being shut down. And again, part of the issue is the current funding formula. We have a cookie cutter approach for all schools. But the issue is, and I can appreciate that in new areas and areas that are developing, we need new schools. But mature neighborhoods, we need to do, I believe, a better job revitalizing mature neighborhoods and ensuring that we don't have, community local schools closing, because they very much are a hub of community activity and are also a great draw for new, younger families to come to communities. And so, the Alberta New Democrats are going to fight every inch of the way to keep our mature neighborhood schools open.
And that is a very, very good comment. However, we will be doing it from the perspective of what is best for students and what provides best education for students, and not from the perspective of revitalizing communities, because all of us here around this table are in the business of educating kids. Unfortunately, we have a lot of empty schools. I'll give you an example. Edmonton Public School Board has over 40,000 empty seats. They could accommodate the entire Catholic School Board and still have places left over, and yet they are bursting at seams in some neighborhoods. So we will have to make decisions collectively to make sure that the quality of education that's offered to those students in those empty schools is adequate. Because when you're running a junior high school, I had a principal call me recently directly. He says, don't tell anybody who I am, but I'm running a junior high school with 76 kids. Those kids are not getting good educations. I can't give them options. I can't take them on field trips. Those are things we need to look at.
It's amazing. It's quite amazing, if I might. It's quite amazing how a provincial election focuses the attention of the work that should have been ongoing for so many years. It's now starting to become evident that if we only wait till after this next election, then trust us, we'll get things done that we've been trying to commit to get done for many, many years. The Albertans will be answering those questions themselves here in the next 20 days about whether or not it's time to wait another 4 years to see if there can be performance, or whether or not it's time to check out a new option for delivering on education in the province of Alberta.
Quick response, Rose. 10 seconds and we're done.
Thomas, on the eve of every election, the government promises the world the day after the election you cut. On the eve of this election, the parents had to go public to maybe get some classrooms. And you want to build 400 schools, you couldn't get the first school right. That's just turned out of Rockland.
Okay, so we're we let that go a good 6 minutes over because that's so much fun. But we have about 17 minutes left, and everyone has their final remarks to go. I do want to give the results of the last poll, if we could, please. And just so everyone hears how all the teachers across the province have responded to this. And they said, I'll read you the largest one right off the top, because this is clearly what's come up here in this discussion. 63% of the people on the phone said that addressing teacher workload issues is the number one issue. 19% said preserving teacher collective bargaining rights. 7% said improving teacher retention. 6% improving professional development opportunities, and 5% maintaining a collegial profession. So, we have so many people who wanted to ask questions. We know we can't get to everybody. We also know at the very end of this, at 9 o'clock, there will be an opportunity for you to leave a voicemail message to the HDA on this. We do have one quick question, which I'm gonna turn this over to Sherry from Sherwood Park, and we're going to ask for just a very quick response from all 5 candidates, if we could. So Sherry, you're from Sherwood Park. Your question for all 5 candidates, please.
What specific examples of how a classroom teacher's workload will be addressed can you give me if your government is the successful winner of our election later on this April?
Okay, Mr. Marciano, do you want to start? 30 seconds, please.
I'm afraid my answer is not going to be very satisfactory. Ultimately, it's not the role of the government to make specific impacts on your workload in the classroom. But we believe the system has more funding, if more decision-making is pushed down to the local level, if more decisions are made at the school board level and at the parent level, that you're going to be closer connected to those decisions and hopefully have a workload that's more appropriate and more conducive to improving the education of students. Ultimately, I'm not sure that there's that much of a role that the actual Ministry of Education or the province of Alberta as a whole should take in deciding the elements and the components of teacher workload. And I think if we headed down that path, we'd have a one-size-fits-all approach that would leave everybody feeling very, very uncomfortable. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Marciano. Mr. Taylor.
Thank you for the question, Sherry. We would restore funding for special programs that assist children with learning difficulties. Integrating them into the classroom is important, but having the resources to ensure that teachers are able to meet the challenges associated with that is as important. So that's a specific example of what the Alberta Party would do to help reduce your workload, restore funding for special programs that assist children with learning difficulties.
Great. Thank you. Mr. Lukasik from the PC Party.
Thank you. Well, I would differ with Wild Rose. We do have a role, and as a matter of fact, we have to take leadership. That is why we have the Ministry of Education that coordinates all the 62 school boards plus the Francophone school boards in the province. Number one, we have to seriously look at administrative workload. And in a bureaucracy of this size, as you know, there obviously is redundancy, and I have already proposed to ATA that we will be looking at redundancy in any work, the administrative work that is being passed down onto teachers, which includes also individualized planning for students, which was meant to be only for special needs. But another component is you need assistance in the classroom often, particularly with special needs kids. So we need to seriously take a look at the support staff that is available to you by way of teaching assistants, librarians, and others who can assist you with some of the students that are simply taking a great deal of demand on your time, and then by doing so preclude you from doing all the other work that you need to do and spending time with other students.
Thank you. Mr. Sherman from the Liberal Party.
Our government actually taking action, stopping committing and meeting this issue to death. Specific example would be, number one, to get your class sizes down and get to that support when we integrate the young people with the special needs, and as well with the standardized testing, let's have you teach to the ability that you're able to teach and to the ability that the students are able to learn.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Sherman. Mr. Billis from the New Democrat Party.
Well, the Alberta New Democrats definitely agree that the government has a role to play. And three quick things. First of all, teachers need prep time. You need time in order to prepare to adequately, do your job. As well, we do need to reduce class sizes, which will also increase the amount of one-to-one time that you have with your students, which will obviously increase the quality of education that you're delivering, which I know you all are probably nodding at home along with me. And as well, we do need to ensure that there are adequate supports, especially when we look at making our classrooms more inclusive.
Great. Thank you for that. We would love to keep carrying on. There's lots of other questions in the queue, and again, at the end, you'll have an opportunity to leave messages for the ATA and to carry this conversation forward on to the election. We'd now like to ask for closing remarks from each of the candidates. We do want to wrap right by 9 o'clock, so we have 12 minutes left. So very strict, we have 90 seconds for starting with Minister Lukasik from the Progressive Conservative Association. Minister?
Well, thank you very much. As you are looking at platforms of political parties, and I know that teachers will be involved in this election, I want you to look at our track record, and particularly our Premier Redford's commitment to education. It is not just a platform where we're telling you what we will be doing, but we have actually shown you our commitment to public education, not only on the policy end, but also on the financial end. I look forward to continuing working with you on a 3-year budget planning, on policy development, on working on the Education Act, and many of the fine things that have been happening in Alberta education over the last 4.5 years. These are not platitudes. This is work that has been actually done in collaboration, in a very collaborative, student-focused manner between ATA, between our school boards, between parents, students, and obviously the Ministry of Education. I really value this relationship. I think it is important to have this positive relationship, and I know that closing our collective agreement, which will happen soon, will further allow us to focus on children in the classroom and on the stuff that we are also passionate about, education in the classroom. So I hope you will consider us in your deliberations as you go and do the most important citizenship deed that you may. You cast your ballot, and I hope you vote for the relationship that we have developed and allow us to continue it into the future by voting for your progressive conservative candidate in any respective riding that you live in. So thank you so much, and thank you for your commitment to our kids.
All right, thank you very much. Next, we'll hear from Darren Billis from the New Democrat Party.
Well, thank you very much for all of you for participating in this phone conversation tonight. I've been a teacher for 6 years now, and I realize that many of you have taught for many more years and realize that our public education system can be greatly improved. I can tell you that I'm running because I'm tired of waiting for this government to get it right. They've had 40 years to get our education system correct, and they've had their time. It's time to put in a political party who values education and makes it a priority. And a lot of the ways that we would address these different issues are looking at, first of all, ensuring the province has the dollars to ensure that our education system is top-notch. The fact that we're, reluctant to invest those dollars and to look at education as an investment in Alberta's future points to how the Tories view our education system. And so I encourage you to look at the Alberta New Democratic Party's platform on education, and you'll see that we are committed to supporting you and ensuring that you have the tools at your disposal to deliver the best quality of education that you're able to. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Billis. Next we have Ross Sherman from the Alberta Liberal Party.
I'd like to thank everybody for participating today, and I'd like to thank Carol Henderson and the ATA for this invite, and all of my colleagues for joining in. Health, education, and jobs in the economy. Of these, the education is so very important. In fact, the education of our children is not only an investment, it's actually a social determinant of health. We need to take a holistic approach to education for lifelong learning from womb to tomb or cradle to grave, starting with prenatal care and postnatal care, nutrition and health, before the children hit the school system, child care, early Head Start and Head Start programs, especially in areas of high need, addressing the diverse needs of the new communities and the new Canadians. Let's adequately fund the K-12 system, and let's make post-secondary education affordable and accessible. Our young kids see a mountain of debt, so they don't bother finishing school. Let's make sure those kids get a skill or a trade and have these RAP programs. Make sure they get registered apprenticeship programs so every child graduates with some sort of skill or trade, not only to meet the needs of industry, but the needs of their community, their family, and most importantly, their needs so they can be the best that they can be. Thank you for the honor.
Thank you, Mr. Sherman. Next, Victor Marciano from the Wild Rose Alliance Party. Victor?
First, I want to thank everyone for the invitation and the opportunity to present our platform out here. I'm going to take Mr. Lukaszyk's recommendation and highlight it again for you. I think you should look at their platform and their track record. Granted, Premier Redford did fund $107 million into the system in October, but that was to fix the mistake that they broke and a mistake that they're carrying on into future budgets. They're continuing to underfund the operational side of it. Wild Rose's platform on education and our commitment to teachers, to educators, and to parents are very clear. We want more education funding, more teachers for our children, more schools where they're needed, established through a depoliticized process. We want more parental choice, improved student learning and assessment, and more support for students with special needs. We think that our platform is a moderate, mainstream platform that will address some of the problems in Alberta, and we think that education can be improved, and your Wild Rose candidate in your riding will be a good start towards getting at some of these problems that have been ongoing for a long time. We hope to earn your vote. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Mr. Victor. Glenn Taylor from the Alberta Party, please.
Thank you, Bill, and thank you to all the teachers that participated in this telephone town hall. It was kind of a cool event. The Alberta Party believes that an inclusive public education system, supported by sustainable and predictable funding with strong systems in place to address the areas of concern, is the right of every Albertan. Recognizing this, the Alberta Party will strive to make funding for education stable and consistent. We will work to ensure that the necessary resources to match students' potential is in place and to ensure the effectiveness of educational spending. We will give all Albertans a voice in educational decisions, and we need to minimize the number of students being left behind by the system and counter the high dropout rates and low transfer rates to post-secondary education. It's time to end the over-reliance on standardized testing. Alberta has the resources to meet the needs of all Albertans. The Alberta Party invites all Albertans to share in the creation of new solutions that will enable us to improve our education system as we build our future. We believe that an innovative, student-centered, creative, and responsive education system will produce innovative and creative citizens for the province and for the world. And finally, I'd like to commend my colleagues on this panel for putting themselves forward as elected public servants. This is a challenging and often thankless role, and while we have a difference of opinion on approaches and solutions, I, for one, would like to thank them all for their commitment to Alberta and Albertans, and thank you for inviting me to this town hall this evening.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Taylor. Just a few more wrap-up things before people go. We have just 5 minutes left. It's been a great pleasure for me, for people who didn't get me, my introduction at the beginning. My name is Bill Mortell-Gannon. I'm the Executive Director of Public Interest Alberta. And we've been thrilled to have everyone join us tonight. Again, if you have comments that you want to leave on the line at the end of this, please do stay on to the very end, and then you'll be able to push a button to leave a comment for the ATA. We would like to pass the microphone over to President Carol Henderson of the ATA for closing remarks. So, Carol, your closing remarks, please.
Well, thank you, Bill. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Bill? Okay, great. Okay. Well, I'm sure glad they suggested that I put my cell phone on mute because my phone died just about 2 minutes ago. Anyway, my name is Carol Henderson, and I'm president of the Alberta Teachers Association, and I would like to thank the over 10,000 teachers for joining us tonight. I'm sorry we missed you with this invitation to join our live telephone hall on public education if you weren't able to join us. We want to encourage all of our teachers to be informed, engaged, and active in this provincial general election. For more information on education issues in this election, please visit our website, voteforkids.ca. That's vote and then the number 4, kids.ca. And thanks again, Bill, for moderating. I really appreciated hearing from each one of the candidates, and thanks to all the teachers who joined us.
Great. Again, if you have a message to leave, you can stay on the line, and you can leave a message for the ATA. This has been recorded, and we also had a line open for media, so there may be some media responses to all of this. Again, thanks to all the candidates for sharing your time with us tonight, and we look forward to seeing the results on April 23rd. Thank you again, and good night.
Thank you. Very much appreciated.